and awkwardly he answered out loud that it happened somehow intuitively. One of the chat participants thought about it, realizing that usually people do not like Popa much, and another viewer ordered Jeju to stop doubting, and asked him to tell everything. Another user wrote that he saw everything, and noted that there was a person there, but it disappeared. In the end, covering his eyes, Jeju put one of the Popoi, which he held in his hands, forward, saying that he wanted to befriend these creatures, since he thought that he would die if she went for them. Popo opened his mouth to reveal his teeth, and while some users said that they weren't teeth but a collection of horror, admitting that they were scared, others were confused and asked what Jeju was even saying. The protagonist asked if the description of the challenge didn't say to eliminate the enemies. He noted that it did, but stated that it didn't mean to kill the enemies, and explained that that was why he simply turned the enemies into allies. User The Love was amazed at Jeju's way of thinking, and one of the other viewers asked if that was logical for the protagonist. That made him scared, and another viewer agreed and laughed. Jeju, lowering his Popa to the floor, said that if he wanted to get along with these creatures, he first needed to understand them, and noted that that was why he simply started repeating after them. He eventually declared that that was how it was, and replied that he was just lucky. One user asked who would even copy their enemy to get closer to them. Another viewer pointed out that Jeju was trying so hard that the world itself helped him, and another user said that it was terrifying. The protagonist pointed out that even if they didn't fully believe him, they had already let things slide, and decided that he needed to live up to the image of a rookie, so he had to pretend that he didn't know anything about the rewards. He asked himself if that was true. Smiling, he looked towards the portal that appeared and said that he was going to go to the second floor now. The Love asked if he had forgotten anything. Another viewer admitted that it was already annoying to remind rookies to collect their rewards, and another person agreed, saying that this user was already a pro at watching rookie streams. Jeju asked in surprise, were they really talking about rewards? The viewers explained to him that there was a reward on each floor and advised him to look in his system window. The protagonist did as they said, and very soon a gift box appeared next to him. Many viewers were surprised, not understanding why it was so cute, and noticed that the box was bigger, the higher the rank of the reward. One of the viewers admitted that he thought the admin would deceive Jeju, and laughed, calling him a tsundere. The protagonist, smiling happily, decided that he would open this box right now, and lifted the lid, noticing several items inside. He noticed that the reward was different from the one he saw in the video, because instead of a sword, he got stones. He decided that he needed to look at each reward, and took out a stone from the box, which the Popo immediately noticed. The user The Love suggested that Jeju check it out, and one of the viewers, watching the actions of the protagonist, asked what he was doing. Another user pointed out that this was different from what was usually given, and suddenly the Popo jumped up, aiming for the stone, but Jeju pulled his hand back in time, ordering the Popo to stop. Someone in the audience suggested that the letters were food for the Popoi, and another person noted that the Popo really liked this, and said that these stones were like some kind of candy for them. One user decided to come up with a line that these creatures could use, and on behalf of the Popoi, called Jeju the owner, asking him to give it to him right now. He, looking at the stone with alarm, noticed that it looked like a mana stone, and was surprised that he had already received this on the first floor. A normal mana stone was bright blue, but this stone was some kind of white, so the viewers have not yet noticed what exactly it is. Mana stones could be bought from the shop starting from the 10th floor, but it was too wasteful to give to the Popoi, as it cost at least 5,000 coins. After apologizing to the Popoi, Jeju promised that he would give them something better later, and although the creatures looked disappointed, they calmed down. One user asked if the protagonist was going to check the item's information. Another viewer called the person stupid, and asked how he could do that if they didn't tell him. Another person laughed, saying that Jeju had such a calm expression that he looked like a walking corpse. The protagonist asked in surprise, what is item information? Viewers explained to him that you can check the information of created items, and if the information does not appear on its own, the item is useless. User The Love explained in more detail, telling Jeju to think in his head what exactly he wants to know about the item. The protagonist picked up the next item that was in his box and noticed a system notification that announced that it was a normal voucher for a free nickname change. With this, Jeju could change his nickname for free once, and while watching this, viewers asked why this appeared on the first floor. They were very surprised and laughed, explaining that streamers do not use their real names like Jeju. The protagonist admitted that he was not sure if this was good, and so he decided to put the voucher aside for now and move on. He thought that it could be used after the 5th floor, and one viewer laughed, suggesting that Jeju did not know what to do with it yet. Another viewer responded, in other words, if the nickname is long, then it definitely needs to be changed. Some asked Jeju to definitely change his nickname, and user The Love asked if there were any normal people here. She did not understand why she would use this voucher right now and laughed. Taking out the last item from the box, which turned out to be a bag, the protagonist said that coins were coming next. Soon after he pulled out the bag, it began to disappear, and the money was less interesting to the users, since it was standard and money was given to everyone. Smiling, Jeju announced that he was now heading to the second floor, and began to walk towards the portal, but suddenly one of the popoi began to jump in the opposite direction, and the protagonist flinched, noticing this. The other two popos soon joined their comrade, and stretching out his hand after the creatures, Jeju exclaimed that they were going in the wrong direction. Sighing, he put his hand on his neck and, turning to the audience, asked if anyone knew why the popoi were acting like this. However, no one knew, and one of the viewers advised Jeju to follow the popoi if he was interested. The protagonist indeed followed the creatures and noticed that they stopped near a wall. One of the monsters opened its mouth first, and the viewers were horrified, asking if it could be blocked. Someone asked Jeju to put a warning for the popoi to open their mouths, and while the viewers in the chat were indignant, the popoi began to devour the rock, and grinning, one of the users noted that they were starting a second mukbang. Someone suggested that this was a sign of protest because Jeju did not give the popoi those shining stones, and another person asked if this person really thought so. Jeju disagreed with these assumptions, bending down to look at the tunnel that the popoi had already managed to dig, assuming that they smelled something. He thought it might be another mana stone, and suddenly heard the popoi scream from deep within the tunnel, and assumed they were telling him to come over. He decided that he would do it, and told the viewers that he would go after the popoi. The viewers were surprised, as some of them thought that Jeju would stop acting weird, but he was actually going to go after the popoi. One of the users suggested that the protagonist should just go into the portal, and user The Love asked if that was too much. She advised Jeju to look at the size of the hole, and pointed out that his hands would get cut. As the protagonist squeezed into the tunnel, he announced that it was much tighter than he thought, and worried for him, the viewers began asking if he was okay. Some of them found it painful to watch, as they knew that Jeju would scratch all his skin. However, he said that he was fine, and the viewers were surprised, as one of them had just seen the protagonist scrape his elbow. Another user noted that it was very painful, stating that he knew from personal experience, as he had scraped his skin while riding a bike. However, Jeju thought that he was fine, and pointed out that for some reason it did not hurt that much. It felt like the protruding rocks were giving him a light massage, and sometime after he crawled through the tunnel, someone asked when he would get there. Many people were rushing him, and user The Love told him to turn back if it hurt. Jeju simply announced that he would speed up, and suddenly froze, noticing that his arm had started to glow. The viewers were amazed, and some of them began to laugh, while Jeju screamed in horror, covered in sweat. He didn't understand what was happening to him, and one of the users asked others if the protagonist had just noticed it. Someone said that Jeju should have a nickname called Flashman, and another person noted that it was a mode called Flashlight. Some others supported the proposal to change Jeju's nickname, and he, distracted from the messages in the chat again, noted that he had the same feeling as when he ate the mana stone. The popoi began to glow after they ate the mana stone, and the protagonist assumed that this is what was happening now. In the end, he just decided to continue on his way, and one of the users said that it looked like that, and asked if it was true. Many agreed that it did look like that, and some users, focusing on these speeches, admitted that they did not understand Jeju. The protagonist continued to crawl stubbornly, thinking that he knew that this was the power of a knight. The fifth floor was also known as the job change room, and their users chose their path. Knights specialized in close combat and had a developed physical form. Mages specialized in a wide range of communication magic, and you could also become a magical engineer, useful in any field. However, you could only choose one of the three. There were also non-combat jobs, but it was not very popular, because it was useless for passing the tests. Jeju understood that the power he activated now was similar to a knight who strengthens his body with an aura located in it. He put his palm to the stone, and it crumbled from his power. Soon the protagonist reached the cave where the popoi reached, which now stopped next to some object lying on the floor. Also noticing this object, the users began to warn him about it, and one of them suggested that if the popoi were circling, it meant that they found something to eat. That's why the viewers started telling Jeju to pick it up quickly, and looking at it in amazement, the protagonist asked what it was. He apologized, realizing that it was a necklace, and while picking it up from the floor, he said that it looked like an item. When he picked up the necklace, the popo flinched while looking at it, and the users realized that the popo called Jeju to get the item. Some of them asked if it was the necklace they often see. The popo suddenly started jumping up and down, trying to get the necklace, and the protagonist shouted, not allowing them to do so, and at the last moment, he raised his hand higher. After that, when the popo calmed down, he looked closely at the necklace, and a system notification appeared next to him, telling him that this necklace was a rare rank talisman. Some people said that this necklace would bring good luck once a person starts wearing it on their neck. Also, the necklace would be destroyed after saving the user from death once, and noting that it was a rare rank, viewers were surprised, as they realized that it was a top item. They did not understand what the talisman necklace was doing on the first floor, and someone began to take back their words about the voucher being too cool, as the necklace would actually match these words. Many did not understand what kind of nonsense was going on, and some asked Jeju to tell them about the cheats he uses. The protagonist frowned in shock, looking at the pendant, and noted that one look is enough to understand that this item is good. One of the users asked the rest to look at Jeju's expression, as he noted that he did not even know why this item was so cool. One viewer wrote that this item is for one time, and therefore it is rare, and in general, the rank of this should be heroic. Some began to get angry, admitting that they wanted to hit Jeju at least once. The protagonist remembered that in the video, he used this talisman before to survive on the 15th floor. This item was received by people after the minimum floor, that is, the 10th, and thanks to Popoi, Jeju received it already on the 1st. Closing his eyes, he thought with a little disappointment that the problem was that it was too early. Suddenly, the system notified him that the user the love sponsored him for the 10th moment, and she also sent him a voice message, advising him to wear this necklace. Jeju shuddered in surprise, and users paid attention to this message, noting that they had a rich kid here. Many were curious if anyone knew who it was, and some actually answered that they knew the love, because she has a famous nickname, and explained that this is a famous type of rookie. Jeju, smiling, put on the necklace and thought that it was cute, because it raised people's interest. He thanked the love in his mind and decided that he would wear the necklace, but hide it under his shirt so that it would not be noticeable to the audience. He eventually announced that he would be returning to the portal now, and the audience began calling him smart, and also remarked that he was very cute. Some noticed that Jeju was somewhat distant, as he continued to address them very politely. Finally, after getting out of the tunnel, Jeju, having placed 3 popoi on his shoulders, approached the portal, and, looking at the creatures with excitement, he asked if they were sure they would go. The popoi nodded, and the protagonist admitted that he did not want to leave them, so he said that he would not mind. Having placed all the popoi on his shoulders, he closed his eyes, preparing himself, and one of the viewers asked why he himself was so worried. However, other users reassured the man, saying that Jeju would be fine since he had good pets and items. Someone suddenly admitted that he just thought he was terribly angry, and, sharing the mood of this man, another viewer wrote that the talisman necklace was too much. Meanwhile, the protagonist, having tuned himself, smiled and told himself to go forward, after which he took a step, approaching the portal. He looked intently straight ahead and soon stepped out of the portal, squinting from the fact that at the very beginning he was met by a sharp gust of wind. Popoi also squinted, and when the wind died down, Jeju opened his eyes, amazed to notice that he was in a different place. He froze in shock, realizing what it was, and decided to look around first. Announcing this, he looked at the system window, where the chat was shown, and then went to the plate hanging on the wall of the Colosseum, and peered at the symbols written on it. Suddenly, a system appeared in front of the characters, showing the translation of these words, and announced that the protagonist must remember the spilled blood of those whom others call heroes. Smiling, Jeju said a little awkwardly that it was a little creepy, and suggested that someone wanted to scare him. One of the users said that it was not bad, while another person agreed with Jeju's assumptions, declaring that it was a problem. Another viewer, laughing, advised the protagonist to look further, and surprised, he turned around, asking again. He noticed another slab hanging nearby, and soon the system already showed him the translation, that there is both nobility and dishonor in efforts, so do not think that all efforts are the same. Jeju frowned in concentration, thinking that it was true, since the same efforts did not necessarily lead to the same results. He mentally noted that he was born with a dirty spoon in his world, but he decided that all efforts were still efforts, so it was better to try than not try at all. He looked straight ahead with determination, and then suddenly shuddered, noticing the system window next to him had changed. It announced that the test would begin in 10 minutes, and announced the conditions of the task, which was that Jeju had to survive for 30 minutes against the monsters that would stand in his way. The system also began a countdown until the test began, and the protagonist, worried, asked himself, were there really 10 minutes left? He was sure that there was no time to waste, since he needed to prepare. He exclaimed out loud that his test would soon begin, so he announced that he would check the store. He opened the right window of the system, and someone from the audience laughed, telling Jeju to go somewhere, and one of the users warned that if red bears appeared, the main character would greatly regret throwing that necklace on the first floor. Jeju crossed his arms over his chest, covering his eyes, and thought, imagining various weapons, armor, and a shield. He understood that since this was a high difficulty, if he was unlucky, red bears would appear, and if not, 2 sea snakes could appear. He mentally noted that the red bear's entire body emitted flames, and it could spit fire, and also the bear itself was gigantic. Against this, you could hide under the shield and try to hold out for 30 minutes, and after that, Jeju began to remember the information he knew about sea snakes, and noted that these monsters may seem strong, but outside of the water, they are not capable of much. He only had to avoid their tail, which they would try to strangle him with, which meant that if he encountered a sea snake, he could simply buy a weapon and defeat it. Holding his chin with his hand, he hoped that everything would go as expected. However, if he remembered the unpredictable experience of the first floor, there was a high probability that everything would not go according to plan here. Thinking about this, he looked at the popo that continued to sit on his shoulders, but smiled, deciding that everything would be fine, since he was sure that they could not give him an impossible test already on the second floor. He asked for the test to begin despite what could be waiting for him there. Soon, the system showed that the test was beginning and began the countdown. A portal began to appear in front of the protagonist, and, noticing that this portal was very small, Jeju assumed that it could be a sea snake. However, the portal began to grow larger, and the protagonist assumed that in this case it would be a red bear. The chat began to discuss again, and one of the users also assumed that, judging by the size of the portal, a bear would now crawl out. Many advised Jeju to quickly buy protection, and some said that it was time to start hysterical about the lost necklace. Meanwhile, the portal continued to expand, and opening his eyes wider, Jeju shuddered in fear, and then began to sweat from fear, looking at how large the portal had reached. The popoi were also scared and looked at the portal in anticipation, not understanding what kind of monster could appear because of this. The protagonist asked himself, has the portal become too big? Suddenly, he mentally exclaimed that this could not be, and such a reaction was caused by the fact that the monster began to emerge from the portal. When it stepped on the ground, clouds of dust rose into the air, and having completely emerged from the portal, the monster roared, opening its mouth wide filled with fangs. Jeju winced, realizing that it was a dragon turtle, and the viewers began to worry as well, not understanding why exactly this appeared. Some of the users were not so excited, and laughed. One of them said that he was wondering why Jeju got the talisman on the first floor. Another person noted that everything was now balanced, and the protagonist, nervously scrolling through the system window in front of him, thought that he hoped that this would not happen, but the worst happened. He now had 292 coins, and while he was looking for the weapon he needed in the store, viewers in the chat noticed that this was indeed a high difficulty. Someone remembered that this monster appears in 3-person trials. Someone advised Jeju to go apologize to the admin. Finally finding the right product, the protagonist selected the one-handed axe of raids, and the weapon began to appear in his hand. This axe was a rare rank and a masterpiece created by a master blacksmith of the Red Iron Battle. The handle and blade of this weapon were fused together to increase durability. The blade was forged with mithril, due to which the constant characteristics of the weapon were increased. Watching Jeju's actions, the viewers began to be indignant, calling him names, and asking why he chose a weapon? They were amazed that he was going to kill this monster, because even if he wanted to run away, nothing else would work with such an axe. The protagonist remembered that if he killed monsters during streams, he would receive a hidden reward, and took a fighting stance, warily looking at his opponent. The turtle focused its gaze on him, and Jeju ordered himself to run forward, and headed towards the turtle. Everyone was amazed that he was attacking straight from the front, and many felt sorry for the protagonist, because he was just a child who knew nothing about weapons. Some still did not understand what the dragon turtle forgot on the second floor, and the monster at that time raised its paw, intending to crush Jeju, who ran closer to it. When the turtle lowered its paw, dust rose into the air, and users began to assume that the protagonist had died. Someone noted that even if Jeju survived the blow itself, he would die from shock, so this meant that it was all over. Some were indignant at the protagonist's behavior, since they understood that this monster could not even be pierced, and asked why in that case it was necessary to attack straight from the front. However, when the dust began to clear, users noticed that Jeju managed to dodge the monster's attack and was now standing, holding an axe stuck in the paw of this one. Shocked, users began to ask how he ended up there. Someone from the audience called Jeju a leech, noting that he was scared. Someone drew attention to the fact that the popoi on the shoulders of the protagonist were simply resting. Jeju, meanwhile, realized that he would not be able to defeat the turtle with one blow, and remembered that he was going to try to climb on its back. He did not know how much strength he received from the mana stone, and concentratedly looked at his palm, clenched into a fist. The turtle, meanwhile, turned around, looked at him furiously, and paying attention to how this monster was breathing, Jeju realized that this turtle was furious. Suddenly, the turtle opened its mouth wider, directing a powerful magical attack towards the protagonist. But despite the suddenness of this attack, Jeju managed to dodge, and everyone was amazed that he was able to repel this attack. Some suggested that he had noticed the change in the turtle's breathing and was able to avoid it, while others exclaimed that it was pointless, since the protagonist had not even had time to catch his breath after the first blow. Jeju, jumping off the turtle's leg that he had been clinging to the entire time, thought that if it were a red bear, he could have withstood it by simply blocking its attacks, but he had already learned the dragon turtle's attack pattern. He realized that he could kill this monster, and mentally turning to the hidden reward, he said that it was waiting for him. He smirked, frowning in concentration, and looked resolutely at the turtle, which continued to watch him infuriated. Jeju ran between the monster's legs, striking, and mentally noted that he should attack the hind legs. Gripping the handle of the axe tighter with his palms, he swung, and his body began to exude magical energy, which allowed him to strengthen his blow. The popoi sitting on his shoulders also began to frown furiously, and blood spurted out from the wound that Jeju had inflicted on the turtle. The monster screamed, and the viewers even began to feel sorry for it, noting that it was painful for them to even watch. The turtle swung its tail, trying to hit Jeju, but he easily dodged this attack and smiled, looking over his shoulder at the monster, since he could not let it know his next move. The turtle breathed furiously, and the protagonist ran away from it further and, looking at the monster, he assumed that it was thinking about how to catch him. The turtle suddenly climbed into its shell, and its body began to exude a dim magical aura. The users were surprised that the monster was hiding, but quickly realized that this was restoring health. Some people were really annoyed by the turtle's habit of healing itself, because it was hidden in its shell simply because the wound was bleeding a little. Jeju remembered that the reason the dragon turtle was so hard to defeat was because of its fighting style. It was able to heal itself while hiding in its shell, and so too often you had to just sit there and wait for it to come out again. While the turtle was healing, Gruit joined the stream and said that he had seen the cover but asked what was going on here. He asked if this was the second floor? Another user confirmed that it was indeed the Colosseum, and Gruit asked in confusion, why was the dragon turtle here then? Soon after, Followa joined in and announced that the person he was rooting for had died, so he decided to defect here. The other users greeted him, calling him a refugee, and he asked if Jeju was already on the 11th floor? Some of the spectators laughed, noticing that everyone was saying the same thing, and the main character suddenly realized that he needed to act now, and he climbed onto the turtle's shell, moving along it with sharp jumps. Having caught on one of the spikes protruding from the monster's body, he stopped, smiling happily, and thought that everything was fine, because he was able to climb here at the moment when the turtle removed its paws. Watching his actions, the spectators were amazed again, starting to ask if he really climbed onto the turtle's shell because he thought it was safe up there? The spectators assumed that Jeju might just not know something, because he was a newbie, and realized that it didn't seem like he was checking the chat at all, so telling him anything was pointless. The protagonist thought that a large number of people who encountered the dragon turtle might think that they would be safe if they climbed up, but the spikes protruding from the shell could start to glow red and explode, in which case it was all over. He imagined how this could happen and decided that he needed to find a weak spot. He began to look closely at the spikes, but was suddenly startled as a system window next to him notified him that user The Love had donated him 10 coins, and also sent a voice message warning that the spikes on the shell explode, so Jeju should come down from there. The viewers noticed that the protagonist had not read the chat, so The Love sent him a voice message, and began to talk about Jeju receiving coins from a major, admitting that it was unexpected and saying that people who donate to games are always like that. However, despite the advice, the protagonist continued to move along the turtle's back, and finally mentally exclaimed that he had found it. Looking at one of the spikes, he noted that judging by the size of this one, it was the turtle's weak point. Pressing his lips tighter from the effort, he swung his axe, aiming at the spike, and struck, cutting through it. However, the spike did not break, and realizing that he needed to strike again, Jeju swung again, and his body turned out to be an intensely magical aura. Noticing the light emanating from him, some users began to call him Flashman again, and some asked in confusion, could anyone explain why Jeju was glowing? Those viewers who understood what was going on told these users to just sit and guess, answering that only they understood it. The protagonist broke the spike with another blow at that moment, and having caught it, stood up, looking straight ahead with concentration and thought. One of the users admitted that he wanted to know what Jeju was thinking right now, and the protagonist meanwhile stood up in a more stable position due to the fact that the turtle began to stick out parts of its body from under its shell, and because of this it began to shake. Frowning furiously, the monster looked at Jeju, and then ran forward, and he asked himself if the turtle was really trying to throw him off by crashing into the wall. He realized that he had one last chance, and getting closer to the edge of the shell, he drove the severed spike into the turtle's neck, and then, swinging his axe, mentally asked for it to work, and striking the blade flat on the spike in order to drive it deeper into the turtle's body, he begged it to move. As Jeju struck, the spike began to glow and the turtle raised its head, feeling an unpleasant sensation. However, before the monster could do anything, an explosion was heard, and as the fire disappeared and the dust gradually began to clear, viewers asked in shock, what just happened? They wondered if the monster was dead. As the dust continued to clear, viewers asked in confusion, what was going on? They did not understand why the dragon turtle was not moving, and asked if this was even possible. Jeju gradually began to move away from the monster, pressing his palm to his hand, and noticing him. One viewer wrote that he initially believed in the protagonist. Another viewer noted that the stream would have stopped if the protagonist died, and admitted that he completely forgot about it. The turtle was indeed lying dead, blood splattered next to the body of this one, and Jeju slightly leaned over, watching the monster. He knew it was a risky gamble, because he had barely managed it. In his mind, he went back some time, to the moment when the turtle was trying to crash into the wall to throw him off. Then he remembered that the spike of the dragon turtle explodes when a stream of mana is directed at it, and he actually did it, pouring the mana he got from absorbing the mana stone into the spike, and then he was going to use it to blow up this turtle. Now, closing his eyes, he noticed that he himself was almost hurt by the explosion, and suddenly the turtle twitched, opening its eyes, and Jeju shuddered, paying attention to this. The monster looked at him, and looking at his axe, the protagonist decided that it was time to finish, and swung the weapon. Soon the system notified him that the test was passed, and thanks to this, the path to the third floor was open. In addition, Jeju not only survived, but also defeated